And it's happening. Welcome. My name is Gigi Naglak. I'm the Director of Programs at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. It is my pleasure to welcome you here today to When Community Becomes the Classroom, Everyone Wins. This is the first in a series of programs that together form what we're calling the Democracy Conversations Project, or DCP. It's a new initiative to explore civic life and democracy, obviously, in New Jersey by convening discussions among community members. For this series, the New Jersey Council for the Humanities has partnered with 8 of New Jersey's excellent community colleges, each of which will discuss a topic of importance to all New Jerseyans as we think about civic life here in the Garden State and beyond. We are eager to explore not only our present circumstances, but how the past has led us to where we are and how we together can create communities that we wish to see in the future. The Democracy Conversations Project is part of Why It Matters, Civic and Electoral Participation initiative, which is administered by the Federation of State Humanities Councils and funded by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation and the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. We are a state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. I would also like to thank the New Jersey Council of County Colleges for their support of this program. This program is being closed captioned using Zoom's closed captioning feature. If you do not currently see the closed captioning happening and you wish to, please plan to enable it on your screen. You can see it at the bottom of your screen with the little CC option. If anyone has any trouble, please let me know. If you wish to ask a question or make a comment during the program, please use Zoom's chat feature. And again, you can see that at the bottom of your screen where it says chat. Tap right in there and I will be able to either reply to you. I'll be monitoring this and I'll be able to reply to you in the chat or hold your question for when we stop for questions throughout the program. We are also live tweeting this event. Yay. For anyone who's on Twitter, we encourage you to follow along using the hashtag #DemocracyNJCH, New Jersey Council for the Humanities. We are absolutely thrilled to partner today with Raritan Valley Community College on this program. And I am thrilled to turn it over to the person that I think of now as my partner in crime, Lori Moog from Raritan Valley, to get us started. Lori.
That's a good way of putting it, Gigi. Well, thanks to you and Angela and Corin and everybody else at the council for involving Raritan Valley Community College in this great project. It's very exciting for us. So I just want to give a little background information about the college before I turn this over to our faculty. So Raritan Valley Community College has a nationally recognized service learning program, and the program enables students to use community service as part of their academic coursework, and they get credit for this experience. We offer service learning in multiple courses within all of our academic departments, as well as both credit and non-credit workforce education classes. So this gives our students a very comprehensive approach to career preparation, professional development, employment, and service to the community. Some examples of engagement can be found in a wide range of service learning courses, and you're going to hear from faculty about that. But some examples are introductory level, capstone, honors, general education, majors, field experience, independent study, teacher prep, and vocational training. So our service learning students are from diverse populations within the community, primarily the counties of Somerset and Hunterdon County, which are the 2 counties served by the college. And those students include recent high school graduates, older adults, low income, minorities, first generation, immigrants, veterans, and ESL learners. And they all do great. We have a really great group of students and they love getting involved in helping the community. Annually, our students provide service to more than 250 community partners in the 2 counties that I mentioned. And I'm thrilled that so many of our community partners are on this call and look forward to hearing from them, as well as many of our students. And just an example, projects and activities address many critical issues of public concern that include hunger, homelessness, literacy, environment, disabilities, English as a second language, domestic violence, substance abuse, childcare, health, nutrition, animal welfare, legal aid, and law, just to name a few. So on that note, I would like to introduce our first faculty member, who will tell you all about who she is and how she does service learning in her courses. So it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Dr. Kathy Sook.
Sorry, I went to unmute and turn my camera off, everybody.
That's okay.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you to Lori and Gigi and everyone at the council for inviting me to be part of this experience. As of yesterday, I thought that I might have to not be here. I had my second vaccine on Sunday, and ran a fever yesterday. So I really wasn't feeling well, but I woke up feeling completely different today. So for anybody else waiting to get their second, it's a 24-hour ride, let me tell you. I am Dr. Kathy Sook, and I have been at RV. I'm finishing up my 13th year. Before that, I was an elementary and middle school teacher for 10 years in Hunterdon and Somerset County. And now I'm at a community college that serves primarily Hunterdon and Somerset County. I serve multiple hats. I fill multiple hats at the college. I have been the education program coordinator. I have been an adjunct coordinator for our entire department. I have been the student success courses coordinator. I am currently an education faculty member and the co-director for the Center for Teaching, Learning, and Scholarship on campus. So, and I'm also a co-chair of a Middle States Accrediting Committee, one of the working groups. So I do a lot of things and dabble in a lot of things, but the aspect of my work, and I have to give a nod to one of my colleagues from the fall. One of my colleagues in the fall did a program about, or maybe it was earlier this spring, about how community engaged scholarship really elevates our practice as faculty. And that particular workshop spoke to my heart so much because it reminded me of my passion. I became a teacher almost a quarter of a century ago because I wanted to be a child advocate. And I decided that the best way to advocate for kids was to give them the tools to do it for themselves. And I still advocate for kids. They just wear bigger shoes and sit in taller chairs, right? So my students know that my role there. Excuse me. My students know that my role there is really to be their champion, to help them to recognize and enhance their level of personal and professional efficacy. That is the bottom line in my work. That is what I aim to do. And when you ask, so my role currently is, I teach the education students, but I also used to teach the student success courses. And I'm going to focus on service learning in both arenas, just to give you an idea of kind of the wide spectrum of different service learning experiences my students have engaged in. But in education first, when you ask a student why they decided to be a teacher, 9 times out of 10, you hear, I love kids. And then the second thing is, I want to make a difference in someone's life. And my whole kind of being for what I do is I don't want my students to have to wait until they are certified teachers to feel like they can make a difference. And the way that happens now without waiting is through service learning. Now in education classes, it is a requirement that you have to go out in the field. But I have taken this requirement at many times in my 13 years and made it more of a focus of what a student wants to do and how a student wants to engage in the community, not necessarily just what he or she or they have to do in the community to meet their 50 hours. So, and one of my former students is on this call, at least I saw her before, Nicole, and she will tell you, that during their time in my courses, they really get an opportunity to focus on what it is about teaching and learning that really kind of fuels them, empowers them, and they get to take that and embed it in a classroom with a cooperating teacher and his, her, or their students that they're working with. Now, it doesn't always work that way because it depends on the partnership with the community partner at that time. Sometimes it just becomes that a student is in the classroom doing observation, and then other times a student is taking over a full class. It really depends on the community partner at that particular time. But each time a student is in a classroom or in a virtual classroom, they get the opportunity to really focus in on what it is that brought them to this profession in a way that is authentic. And that's how the community really becomes the classroom, because it's not just about learning the theory, in the education foundations class. It's about learning to apply it in the education setting, right? In the P through 12 classroom. And during my time in the education classroom, I have had the esteemed honor and an exceptional pleasure of working so closely with Lori. I don't consider her just a colleague. She is definitely a friend. And I have learned so much about civic engagement and moral responsibility and the role that it plays in efficacy for students. And I just want to take a time check. How much time do we each have?
Let's go with like 15 minutes. I think we're good.
Okay, so I have what? I have about 7 minutes more, maybe 5 minutes more. Okay. So during my time in education, one of the key aspects of my service learning role has been to be a faculty lead on a grant that we did through the Teagle Project. And it was through that project that I really got an understanding of what the students think of service learning. So up until that point, I understood that my students loved to be in the field. I didn't understand what they understood from being in the field. And what I can say is, when you are looking at service learning as a way to expand the classroom to make that more authentic opportunity for students, you want to make sure that it always circles back to your learning outcomes, making sure that the students are achieving what the course is about. But probably a bit more importantly, you want them to understand that what they're focusing on in the community actually has a bigger, wider scope in the world beyond their community partner. And that was something that students really did not understand. They didn't understand that when they were going to work with with a community partner that deals with under-resourced populations or homeless populations or food insecure populations, that it wasn't just that population that needed that support. It wasn't just that population that had that problem. There is a larger national and international problem of food insecurity and homelessness and under-resourcefulness. So there's a great deal of kind of theoretical and research-based practice that can be integrated into service learning so that students understand the what and the why and the who, not just the who, because a lot of times that's really what it's about. For them, it's I'm working with this teacher, or I'm working with this agency, or I'm working with this client, and they understand it as working with that entity, but they don't understand what problem or what issue or what concern they're addressing or facing. So you really, when you're talking about service learning and embedding it in a program, you really want to focus on the larger scope of the problem and how the work that your students are doing with it is actually chipping away at that problem, right? Because it becomes a micro effort towards a macro problem. So I'm very honored to have participated in that grant because it gave me this foundational understanding and this scaffolding now to bring into my classroom when I ask my students to think about what they did and why it's important, because that's the crux of the matter. What did you do and why is it important? Why is it important to you as a pre-professional in the work that you want to do? But why is it also important to the world around you, not just that client that you served? So we really talk about it, locally, kind of regionally, and then globally. And this year in particular, with the virtual situation going on, the service learning piece has also become virtual because it was just too cumbersome to get our students married to a community partner in a way that would be fluid, because nothing is fluid right now, right? Everything starts and stops and starts and stops. So really what my discipline colleague and I decided to do was to really look at the big issue of virtual teaching and learning and bring that into the classroom. And we are doing this on a weekly basis. Students are looking at, YouTube channels that have full on playlists. There we go. Someone from Scotland. Excellent. Glad to have you here. Full on playlists of, what's happening in this global pandemic from the teaching and learning perspective. And when we did that, they were able to compare four or five different regions in the world and how this is impacting. And then they brought it down to how it's directly related to who they are as students. So yes, they don't have a cooperating teacher and a classroom to marry, but they are married to each other as each other's cooperating teachers and classrooms. So I guess that the most important thing I would want to say here is I am honored to be a member of the service learning community at RVCC because it allows me to achieve my goal of advocating for students, but it also allows me to achieve my goal of creating a sense of efficacy for a student in the area of employment that he, she, or they choose. And just one final comment, when I was the Student Success Courses coordinator, I taught students from all different disciplines at the college, and a vast majority of them were undecided majors who really didn't know why they were even in college. And we integrated a project in that course called the Passion Project that I designed, and that Passion Project helped them to research and understand potential career paths, and then pick community partners that could help them to learn about those career paths and serve them so that they could then see, okay, yeah, this is something I might want to do. And then ultimately they pick a major, right? It gives them direction and it gives them purpose. So service learning serves so many different authentic goals for a student. It's not just about being able to get those extra credits on your transcript or getting a recipient of an award, at an award ceremony because you did X amount of hours. It's really about learning who you are and who your community is and how you can be a productive member of that society. So I thank you all for your time, and I look forward to hearing what Jennifer and Lauren have to say.
Oh, thank you for that excellent presentation, Kathy. You brought up so many great points. I just want to comment on two because of time limitations, but you mentioned our community, and our community are co-educators. And we're very, very fortunate to be working with community partners who have such a strong interest in our students. And it's not as though they just leave them in the room and they tell them to do something. They are actually working and informing them about the important issues that they're learning in the classroom so they see how it plays out in the real world. The other important point that you brought up is the reason that I love service learning, as you've pointed out, is that it really heightens the whole experience of volunteering. So, it's not just about a student going out and volunteering, but now it's about having a faculty member help them understand what it is they're experiencing and to put that into context, and many different contexts, right? And that's the beauty of service learning, that it's like, so it really elevates the whole volunteer experience. So between the community partner being a co-educator and the faculty member, facilitating this learning, it's a win-win for everyone. So thank you. So on that note, I want to also now introduce another great service learning faculty member, Dr. Jennifer Pierce-Morris.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. And hi, everyone. It's nice to see you and meet you. I am a sociology professor here at RVCC. And one class that I love to teach is contemporary social problems. It's one of our sophomore level classes. And one of the requirements that we do for our class is service learning. where students do it for at least 8 hours during the semester. They are allowed to choose more than 8 if they prefer. And I use service learning for several reasons. First, so that way a student can be actively involved in addressing a social issue. Second, so that a student can see what a service organization does firsthand to address issues that people experience. Third, to apply concepts about social problems from lessons to the real world. And then fourth, after doing their lessons and completing service learning, to be able to formulate ideas on what society can do next to address the social issue, which can include everything from prevention to treatment, from the micro level to the macro level. And at the end of the semester, students submit a reflection paper describing all of this. I have several examples of placements where students have served and the social issues that they address. The Freedom House. This place provides counseling and case management for those with drug and alcohol addiction. The Flemington area food pantry. They help address food insecurity in our local counties. America's Grow a Row. This organization, they harvest and deliver fresh produce to underprivileged communities, which is important giving our growing attention to food deserts. The ARC of Somerset County, they provide support and advocacy for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families. Our MLK Youth Center, they provide after-school programs for local children, including those in need with tutoring, mentoring, meals, and childcare. And then we've even served with the Hillsborough Township Municipal Court and Business Law Administration. And when that location was available for students, the Hillsborough local government was working to address mental health in our local area, which my student was able to help with. What I'd like to do is provide 4 specific examples of how students and their service learning organizations benefited the community, so you can get a sense of what kinds of stuff that your students, and our students have been able to do. For my first example, I had a student who served at the Watershed Institute. And this place, they work to keep water clean, safe, and healthy. They work to protect and restore our water and natural environment in central New Jersey through conservation, advocacy, science, and education. And my student, what he did was he helped plant native species in disturbed areas to help rejuvenate the soil and the ecosystem. And he also helped remove invasive species, which tend to encroach on areas that have been damaged and disturbed by human influence. And this student wants to continue addressing ecological concerns in our area. And so he was really excited that service learning got him this foot in the door and also taught him how organizations are working towards keeping water safe. In my second example, 2 students actually collaborated in an online project together during the semester with COVID that we just had. They served with Spring Rains of Life. In this place, they use skills of mental health professionals and horses to offer therapy to trauma survivors who cannot or do not want to talk about their experiences in a traditional therapy format. Some primary populations that they work with are veterans with PTSD and at-risk teens. So my 2 students, they created an Instagram account as a new platform for the organization to do outreach and promotions. And so they gathered up photos and information from the organization and did the technical work in setting up their account, which is at NJ_virtual_herd if you're interested in checking it out. And I use this example to show you that you can do civic engagement from home and that there are various ways of serving the community. And during COVID, the organization really needed some new ways in order to promote themselves online in order to stay afloat. And so my students are really excited to help out in that way. My third example out of 4 is with a student who served with Norwest Cap Family Success Center of Warren County. They provide underprivileged families with life skills workshops, childcare, support groups, economic and employment services, and information on child and maternal and family health. And so my student, she chose to work at Norwest Cap because she was really passionate about working with mothers. And she did get to serve by providing childcare for those attending a Parents with Autism Support Groups workshop. What the student found interesting, though, is that she also grew in her areas of interest while helping during a Take Back the Night event, which raises awareness about sexual assault and domestic violence. And that event was held at Centenary University. And what she did was she helped manage a communication table, educating people on campus about the services that Norwest Cap offers. For example, Norwest Cap provides referrals to the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Assault Crisis Center. My student was so moved at this event that during the last week of the semester, she decided to continue working beyond the semester and to do more volunteer types of stuff. And so she actually signed up to do training with their Domestic Abuse and Sexual Assault Crisis Center in order to do volunteer with them for many months to come afterwards. And her experience is a great example of how service learning helped her develop this path to personally significant types of civic engagement. And then for my fourth example, I wanted to mention a student who served with Freedom House in Glen Gardner last semester. So this location, they help men recover from a variety of different types of addiction. And the student helped the medical liaison distribute proper medications to everyone. She helped an intake profiler fill out forms in their computer system. And she also got to sit in on some counseling sessions with the men. The men would talk about their journey to recovery, as well as any obstacles that they faced that week. I bring up the student because she found the counseling sessions to be eye-opening. And in her reflection paper, she learned that counseling can be more intimidating than it often seems. Some people like to open up, but getting to the source of why someone abuses drugs and alcohol can be difficult. And if someone feels like they're forced to be in counseling, it becomes even harder. And then also my student, or the counselor told my student that throughout his career, he actually had to break up fights a few times. So my student, she found this experience was helpful because she wants to continue to address addiction, but now she herself has a better understanding about what is that process like and what is it like to actually go through that. She herself wants to be a counselor, and she feels that now she has more of this knowledge about the realities of addiction and counseling and how they're experienced in that journey that she goes through in trying to serve others. So then figure after all this, the last thing that I just wanted to highlight are several ways that service learning helps students, particularly in developing civic engagement, some of which you've probably picked up in these examples. One, the students are involved in helping address issues that are important to them. So something that I always suggest to students is go with something that you're passionate about. Where is it that you want to be involved and to learn more and to create a, help make a difference and to see how you'd want to grow in that regard. And students really appreciate that flexibility. In fact, many of them do go beyond the required hours. And several have continued with their organization after the semester ends. And in their reflection papers, they state that service learning helps them feel socially connected to the community, and they feel more confident in continuing to make changes in society. Two, another way in which service learning really helps with civic engagement is that by knowing how service organizations operate, this helps students in planning their careers because they're more familiar with specific fields of interest and how to get into those fields into the community. I get a lot of students from the pre-social work program and also our social sciences program. And so they take this class. It's one of the electives that they're able to take to fulfill some requirements if they want to use it. And many of them really enjoy it because they get to work with organizations and issues that they're really passionate about. And so someone, for instance, who wants to do counseling, such as the student with Freedom House, she'll know more about what counseling looks like and how do these organizations set up counseling with individuals, so that she has a much better understanding about how to use that going forward in a career. And then three, by doing service learning, students see how the social issues are experienced and addressed at the micro and meso levels of society, which they then try to apply to these larger macro aspects, which I know Kathy Suk was previously talking about as well. So just in case anyone's not sure, micro refers to one-on-one factors. For example, the way maybe individuals help veterans with PTSD. Meso refers to more groups and communities, such as the organizations that they're working with. Then there's that macro level, which refers to our laws, our policies, the larger cultural values that we have in our country. And so with service learning, students can see what's happening on the ground from micro and meso. And then as we progress through the semester, they're asked to suggest changes on what we can do next at the macro level to address these different concerns. So if they want to critique the kinds of policies that we have, for instance, that affect veterans and people with PTSD, if they think things need to be updated, they can do that. And then I'll just end by saying that service learning, it's a wonderful opportunity for civic engagement for students, organizations that they serve, in the larger community. And every year, this course that I teach tends to receive my highest student evaluation ratings out of all the courses that I teach. And students tell me that they really like being a part of the community and being able to serve in a lot of issues that are really important to them. And if anyone is here that's looking to try to embed service learning in their courses, I'd be happy to talk with you about how we set it up with coursework and lessons and things like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. That's another great, excellent presentation. I loved your examples of the different community partners, who they are, what they do, and the examples of what our students are doing with them. Hi, Allison. I know Allison, she's from the Watershed Institute. She wrote in, says hello. But one of the things I kept coming to when you were talking is that you're really giving your students a chance to put theories and ideas into action. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about talking about what the challenges are, what the problems are. It's about how do we solve them? And, you're really putting students in a great position to be leaders in solving those problems so that they themselves feel good about, what they can do for their communities. And we do hope, and I'm sure this will happen because we have some of our students, former students on this call, that they make it part of their careers. They're not just looking at a career in terms of, a profession, but it's what I can do for the community as part of that profession. And I love your course, Current Moral and Social Issues, because the sky's the limit as to what the students could do. But it's no surprise that you're getting great ratings, because I think you've really added so much value to the course with the work that you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'd also like to introduce our next speaker, who is Lauren Braun. And Lauren has a dual role at the college. She is an adjunct part-time professor teaching a course called Human Behavior in the Social Environment. And she's also the executive director of the ARC of Somerset County, which serves children and adults with mental and developmental disabilities. And it's also one of our placements. So take it away, Lauren.
So good afternoon, everybody. What a pleasure it is to be here in front of all of these esteemed community partners and college partners. As Lori mentioned, I have this kind of interesting role in being an adjunct at RVCC and also an executive director at a not-for-profit that benefits from the service learning program. So I have a very interesting perspective on that. And I have to say that my experience with service learning actually started when I started my college career. And I always tell my students, when you're at RVCC, you are at the right place and at the right time. And I say that because I started at my local community college, came out of high school, not quite sure what to do with myself, took a couple courses and fell in love with psychology and quickly transferred to Rutgers University, where I got my bachelor's, and then on to Montclair, where I got my master's degree. And while I was working on my master's degree, the program at the time at Montclair was very experiential, and that's what they called it. It was an experiential learning program. And it was their version of service learning. And I learned so much about the community, the needs of the community, and my potential career path. So always a fan of whatever you want to call that type of learning, experiential learning, service learning. The other thing I talk to my students a lot about is being an executive and a leader of a not-for-profit. I am keenly aware that the United States and probably many nations are about to hit a crisis in leadership. We know that the largest cohort of leaders are baby boomers, and that cohort is getting ready to, if not already, leave their positions and go into retirement. And we don't have enough leadership coming up behind them. So I always talk to my students about, you are the future leaders. You are the future of the not-for-profit sector. You are the future of social services and or whatever career you go into. And so I think that it's always wise to talk to our students while they're young about thinking about leadership, right, in any way, shape, or form. So service learning to me is also a way to explore that for our students. So my course is Human Behavior in the Social Environment, and our service learning component is 15 hours of service learning in one of the organizations that the college has relationships with, and or I allow my students to actually create their own service learning opportunity if they're already connected with a particular community. One thing I do say to my students is any opportunity that comes your way, take it. Even if you think it's not the right opportunity, you take it, because then you can, one, confirm it's not the right opportunity, or two, you can find out it was a really great opportunity. So I do tell my students that although most students prefer to look at a service learning placement that is in line with what they think their future educational and careers are going to be, I do ask them to consider stretching a little bit and do something that might take them a little bit out of their comfort zone. And that's for two reasons. One, to clearly understand where they think they are going to fit in the future. But two, especially in my career and my class, we're social workers, right? What do? We lean into the uncomfortable. So it's really important to get students to stretch a little bit, even if they're early on in their educational career. The other thing about service learning, of course, like Catherine and Jennifer said, is we as professors can stand in front of a whiteboard and talk theory all day long, but unless you see that theory in practice, or at least, you know, unless you can point that out and say, oh my God, there's pre-operational thinking from Piaget because you're working with a child, the theory starts to fall away in terms of your practice. So it's really important to connect theory, right, to reality and practice. So that's another reason I really like service learning. So my students, again, they have placements in all types of scenarios. What I ask is that they choose a placement where people are receiving some type of a service. So it could be a vulnerable population, it could be long-term care, elder care, addiction, homelessness, food insecurity, veteran services, children, any opportunity that you can see and be part of a service to other human beings. And the reason that that's really the only requirement is, in the end, the final project is to actually create a case study about the people or the person that you're doing your service learning with. And the case study is really important because it really helps the student take the whole experience and actually break it down into the learning blocks that they achieved, but also, again, relate back to classroom learning. All right, so they have to apply a theory or theories to the service learning experience. And that's always a really great exercise for my students. The other thing about student service learning that I like is it's the idea of connection, right? It's the idea of connection. So we all know, and if you've ever listened to Brene Brown, who is one of my favorite social workers, right? She says all the time, we are wired for connection. We are wired for connection. We are born to be connected. And certainly that is the first task as an infant, right? Attachment. If you don't get through attachment, you're going to have a really, really tough life ahead of you. And so what I want my students to do is learn how to connect with somebody that you don't know, because certainly that is the basis of any kind of counseling, social work, psychology, psychiatry, and many other professions. It's not just the social professions, but you have to learn how to connect. And so going out there and connecting with somebody that you don't know and may not be able to relate to is a really good skill for our students. So we talk a lot about connection and how do you do that? And that helps in terms of some of the other coursework that our students have to do. Certainly, they take a course on interviewing and counseling, and the first thing you do in interviewing and counseling is making a connection. So this is a really great way to practice connection. The other thing that we really work on is the students, because of the nature of my course, they learn to identify kind of the biopsychosocial aspects of the person that they're working, or persons that they're working with, and how theory relates to a particular life phase. And that's really the foundation of my course, right? You look at the 4 life phases from a biopsychosocial aspect and then apply behavior theory to that. And so the students really get to see that part of the coursework in action. Lastly, the students learn to self-reflect. So we do, Jennifer, like your course, reflection portion of the case study to reflect on what they've learned, what they experienced. I asked them to be very honest about what worked and absolutely what did not work, because I think it's really important as you go through your educational and career path that you understand what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And so I asked the students to spend a little time understanding organizational structure. And that's where my role as an executive director comes in handy, because I can talk about, you know, what it's like to be a not-for-profit, it's like to lead a not-for-profit, hard, and what are the different and various structures that you might encounter if you're going to be working in the not-for-profit sector. Where are the pitfalls, right? So that's another piece that I think it's important for our students to understand organizational structure if they're going to be working out there in the world. So that's a lot. That's you know, that's my course and my service learning in a nutshell. I just want to say a few things about being on the other side of it and being kind of a host agency. We have been working with Lori and her service learning program almost from the beginning, I think, Lori. So we have enjoyed years and years and years of service learning. And what we have discovered is the value of service learning. We started out just working with students who want to work with children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we have a child care center here, we have adults with disabilities, we have a whole range of services. And that was great. And the students really learned a lot about our services and our organizational structure. And then I had one year, I had my foundation director, my fundraiser development director, say to me, well, why do all the service learners go to the programs? Why can't I have a service learner? And so we started to branch out, and we've had service learners then work at our foundation. They work in our finance department. They work in our human resources department. And so these are just really great, bright, motivated individuals who really have a lot to give an organization. And so we really enjoy service learners in all areas of our organization. And I can tell you at any given time, we probably have about 5 or 6 service learners here at the ARC of Somerset County. So let me tell you where we've had service learner, what the majors have come from, even though we're a social service agency. We've had service learners in the nursing program, the pre-med program, liberal arts, math and biology, engineering, business, and chemical dependency and certificate of completion. And one of my favorite stories about a service learning is about a gentleman by the name of Alexander. He's an engineering student, and he wanted to do service learning at the ARC of Somerset County last semester in the midst of COVID. And we pretty much said to our service learners, we would love to have you, but most of our programming right now for our folks is virtual, like the rest of the world. And he said, that's great. What do I do? And I said, I hooked him up with the person who is coordinating all of the virtual programming for our adults with disabilities through day services. And it turns out that as an engineer, if you know engineers, you also know that they can draw pretty well. And so what he ended up doing was a weekly art class for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and it was called Art with Alex. It was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So, so it's great to have a variety of service learners in your organization. My last comment is a very special program, and this is just one other way that I'm kind of tied into the Raritan Valley Community College. Several years ago, we got the opportunity to partner with the college and create a college program designed for young adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities who have graduated high school and still want to go on with their education. They want to go to college like their brother and sister did. And as an advocate, one of my roles is to find those places in our communities where there's lack of access. And so we realized very, very quickly that college for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities was pretty much, you know, not an opportunity. And so we created this opportunity at RVCC. And so part of the program, I'm not going to go into great detail, you can call me if you want. Part of the program was, and very important to us, was that each student who was in, it's called the Achievement Center, each student with disabilities who was at the Achievement Center had a peer mentor, a typically developing college student who was their one-on-one mentor on all kinds of things, not just academics, but how do you navigate a college campus? How do you meet friends? How do you get to the cafeteria, right? All the social things that we go to college for. And so service learners have been amazing peer mentors for our students at the Achievement Center. And in fact, so amazing that over the course of the last couple of years, 6 of our service learners who came to us and then turned into peer mentors for our students with disabilities have actually been hired by the ARC of Somerset County to work at that college program. So it's full circle for me, and certainly for the students and all of the people that benefit from service learning. So I just have to say I enjoy having this kind of dual role, maybe a triple role with the college, and I think that service learning, if it could expand even more, I think it would be not only great and beneficial for all of our students, but certainly for all of our communities as well.
Thank you for an outstanding presentation on that, Lauren. One of the things that I kept hearing you talk about, which I just want to mention, is the whole notion that you're putting students in leadership positions, and you're creating future leaders. And you're right, most of us at some point are going to leave our positions, and it's now our students' time for them to build the communities, and they're having a great chance to learn about it now while they're in school. And one of the things that you've touched on and mentioned, as well as Kathy and Jen, is that you really encourage your students to get outside of their comfort zone. Don't think about the things that you usually do. Think about things that are different. And I can tell you, the outcomes are great. Your students never complain. If anything, they are so happy. They've learned so much. So it's done in such a great way that you're, giving them a chance to do something different as well. And just lastly, I want to mention, your examples of how service learning has evolved at the ARC are really great, where we started out working with you with one division, right, one department, and now it's in all sorts of other areas. And I want to mention that, unfortunately, the RVCC childcare has to close, due to the pandemic and, the expenses. But Lauren just sent me an email that she would really like to open up the doors to the Jerry Davis Childcare Center at the ARC for our students, which is fabulous, because I know that Kathy Sook and Kim Scherner and everybody else's students love to go to childcare centers, and that's going to be available for them in the fall as well. So thank you. And, it's just a great example of how, with you as a community partner and many of our community partners, things keep evolving and getting better and better. So, thank you, Kathy, Jen, and Lauren, for just outstanding presentations. You make this work seem, and I know it is, so interesting, so fun, so valuable, and you make it seem so easy too. It's like just what you do. So I don't want to take up too much time, because I really want to hear from the community partners that we work with, our students that are on this call. And I also want to just mention my colleague is here, Nicole Poyer. She's in AmeriCorps, Community Engagement Coordinator, working in my office and working with all of our students and our community partners as well, and I hope to hear from her too. I know you have some questions and you're moderating, Gigi, so I'll let you take over.
I do. There are a couple of questions. I'm gonna, because we're already talking about this, I'm actually gonna do them in reverse order, if that's okay. There was a question about if any of you have experience supporting students with communication or processing differences, such as autism. And the person who asked this question, if CL, if you want to unmute yourself and clarify, I would appreciate it.
Great. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. I was meaning more in terms of the mainstream students rather than the Achievement Center, because it sounds like the Achievement Center have a higher degree of intellectual disabilities. And I know that autism can exist without the sort of learning and intellectual disabilities, but I'm also very aware, after 15 years experience as a play worker and early years practitioner, other adults can be quite difficult to work with if you have those differences. So are there any students who have benefited from things like role play or clarifying who you email in which instance? Because that kind of information is often overlooked.
Okay, yeah, Kathy, you want to jump in?
So CL, I do apologize. I am multitasking. I am a single working mom, and I have a virtual learner who's 8 years old at home. So I was helping him with his math while you were asking your question, but I heard the tail end of the question, and I saw it in the chat earlier. I can speak to the fact that I have dealt with a number of students that have had processing delays and neurological disorders, have been on the spectrum, and I've helped to place them in the community, whether it be at RV, whether it be beyond RV with an agency or a school. And you're right, the employability skills, the soft skills, are often the areas that they need the greatest support with. And I can say for certain in the student success course, and Lori can attest to this, having worked so closely with me, that is where I saw the greatest challenge to developing a student's efficacy to be able to craft an email appropriately or make a phone call appropriately. So what we decided to do, and this is something, you know, that I could recommend, we actually brought Lori and her colleague Sharon into our classroom. Instead of having the students do the paperwork and bring it to Lori and Sharon, they came into my classroom and they spent an entire period in my room going student to student, literally making phone calls and emails to community partners during the class time. And it was simply not to do it for them, but to model for them, because I cannot model for, I was teaching at that point, I was teaching 8 sections of 20 students. I cannot model for 8 sections of 20 students how to make a phone call, you know, so we had all 3 of us doing it simultaneously across the classroom. And while other things, you know, other independent activities were happening simultaneously. So I think the greatest piece of advice that I could offer in this situation is when you are integrating this kind of an experience in a classroom, you do want to model the employability soft skills for your students that you feel are going to struggle with them. And for students that are not going to struggle with them, simply a sample email is enough. You know, this is what it could look like. This is what it could sound like. We did do role play in other areas of the classroom, but we didn't do it in this example.
I would just add that, so our peer mentor structure does work very, very well with students with autism. Certainly we have a number at the TAC, but I've had a number of students myself who present with some, you know, the soft social skill issues, communication, social distance, right? Those types of things. And so even if they're not at the Achievement Center program and they're in my classroom, I try to work with some fellow students on modeling, you know, and buddy system mentoring. And that works really well because it's a peer, not another adult telling them what to do.
Thanks so much for your answers. It's just really wonderful to hear. And I was late diagnosed, so all of the social stuff, I was almost passing as normal, but then, you know, normal, there is no such thing. But yeah, no, it sounds like it's something that you've all considered really, really well. And it's amazing. Like the mentor system and the modeling, I definitely learned through doing. So, you know, my instinct is to get someone to show me how to do it. Sounds like you're doing such great work.
Thank you so much for your question. All the way from Scotland. Yay, one of my favorite places in the world. There was another question earlier, actually, in our conversation about, do you keep a standard list of community partners? Do you only work with 501c3s or other nonprofit organizations? Or could you work with, have you ever worked with organizations that do benefit the community but may in fact be for-profit? And the example that was given is a social enterprise for-profit organization, but nonetheless focuses on supporting the community. And that came from our friends at Brick City Bricks, I think it is. So if you want to unmute yourself and clarify your question or add anything to mine, please don't hesitate to do so.
No, that was it. You know, I guess in the last 5 years or so, one of the things, new business conventions is certainly benefit organizations, right? Organizations that have a double bottom line, where one of their goals is to impact outcomes in the communities as well as have a profit line. And one of the things that some of us struggle with is having people understand that, you know, we can be of great service within a for-profit or even a corporation, and make sure that we're bringing those skills and understandings even within those agencies. So wasn't sure if that was something you were considering as one of your partners as well. Understanding there's certainly a lot of great work that's happening with the 501c3s, but there are some other organizations that are attempting to do some of that work as well.
So that's a great question. And the answer is yes, we work with predominantly nonprofit organizations that include, after school programs, soup banks, food banks, soup kitchens, domestic violence shelters, homeless shelters, nursing homes, assisted living facilities. And your particular question about the for-profit organization that provides service to the community, the answer is yes, we would love to get involved as long as what the work that the for-profit is doing is to the benefit of the community. We would love to hear more about that work and partner. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that, but.
For my class, we go with the list that Lori Moog has, and then if a student has other organizations that they're passionate about, I usually say yes to it, as similar to what you said, as long as it's providing some kind of service. So I know we would be interested in having that as something on our list as well for the course.
Kathy, you had your hand up too.
And I would just offer that another option for your organization to consider, if you want to include student learners, experiential learners in your environment, is to look at apprenticeship and internship opportunities, because almost all of the colleges, including all of our community colleges, have those offices as well. So, you could do things where students could come and learn, about the skills that your organization fosters and earn credit for it, just as they would for service learning, but there could be a paid or not paid experience attached to that as well. So that I think there's multiple things for you to consider in that regard.
For those of you that are interested in designing service learning programs and courses, I just want to mention that the Service Learning Office, as Jen mentioned, maintains a whole list of placements. Students, as the 3 faculty members explained, are able to find their own placements, but we monitor that. So if it is a good placement at the end of the semester, then we get in touch with them and most likely we'll add them to the list as well. But when you're thinking about setting up a program with a faculty member, one of the things we do is we work closely with the faculty member to show them what those placements are and to make sure that those particular community organizations have the ability to meet the goals of the service learning program. And so that is one way in which you manage a service learning program, particularly as it grows and gets bigger, is ensuring that the community partners, meet the requirements of the goals and that of the course. And if they don't, then we'll just take them off the list and put them on to another course as well.
Right. So like, for example, we do STEM enrichment types of classes and programs and camps. And actually 2 of the camps that we have quotes out right now for the summer. One is with a chap of, I want to say, Somerset County as well. So to do a program for children who were impacted by domestic violence. We'll be doing, building classes with them, but again, it's to serve that population. So we want to make sure that we have instructors and assistants who want to work with that population, right? So they get experience doing that. And another program that we're working with is a program that works with families who are impacted by autism. So we're talking with people on the spectrum. And we work with their children. So the children are coming and we're working with them. And so again, we want to make sure that the instructors that we have, that you get to experience that working with the population, even though we are a for-profit organization, but we do work with all of these different agencies that are supporting the appropriate communities that would need the service.
That's great. You should shoot me an email and we'll talk more. And, as Kathy Sook mentioned, we have an internship program and I believe they would be interested as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much. There's another question that's come through. Is there ever any discussion in the classes or in placements regarding helper and helped dynamic, elements related to power dynamics? I personally find this question to be very interesting because it's something we think about a lot at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. We're a funder. So what dynamics of power and capital, literal capital in our case, do we sometimes have, and where does that responsibility lie? Roya, if you have anything to add that I didn't capture in your question, please jump in.
I don't. I think I mean, unless somebody actually has a specific question about it, like what I meant, but I think it was pretty stated, well stated.
I do a little bit of that when I ask the students to look at the organizational structure. Certainly they can't do a deep dive, wouldn't be appropriate, but I do ask them to understand kind of where we don't use the word power because of course we have no power, but we do ask them to understand, right, kind of the organizational chart and who makes decisions. I think the other thing that we do talk about a lot is ethics. And so before going into a service learning environment, we do talk about what would happen if you thought you saw something that was unethical or fraud, waste, or abuse, or that you felt uncomfortable around an interaction that you saw. So we do talk about that a little bit in terms of ethics and organizational structure.
This is so fascinating to me, just in terms of ethics. You're talking about a discipline of the humanities. So often we spend a lot of time in our world at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities and in the humanities in general, trying to defend the value of humanities work and humanistic inquiry. And then when you're talking about how critical these ethical questions are, that they're foundational to relationships that we have, particularly in areas where one person is in service to another, and those weird power dynamics. This is really, really interesting that this actually, when we're talking about this, we're talking about philosophy, we're talking about history, we're talking about populations and the way we value humans. It's really, I have nothing specific to ask about that, just wanted to throw it out there.
So I just kind of, did somebody else have a question? Okay, I just wanted to add something. I know that Kathy Sook mentioned the Teagle assessment project that she did for 3 years. And one of the questions was asking the students their, ethical and moral responsibility to their communities. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, but I know that from you and other faculty members, that was the hardest question for students to answer. It might be the most obvious, but it was the most difficult. And part of your project was to elicit those responses from students by asking that direct question. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yeah, and it all stemmed from the fact that they didn't understand that micro, meso, macro kind of hierarchy that Jen was talking about. They could not understand how what they were doing, was developing who they were as a citizen of the world. They felt that what they were doing was just doing it for that particular organization, or with that particular organization, or with that particular client. They could not make the connection that they were actually serving a greater issue, a greater concern, a greater problem in the world, and and engaging in it now was developing their understanding of it over time, that they could continue to focus on it later. It was the most difficult part of the program, and I think it was twofold. I think it was because they lacked that wider global understanding, and maybe Nicole would like to talk about it because she was part of that as a student, if my memory is serving me correctly. They lacked that global perspective, but also because it required them to explore the problem beyond their client. They actually had to do some research. So I think it was two-pronged why it was the most challenging piece.
Nicole, can we count on you for some feedback on that? I know you have a, pretty broad perspective.
Oh, hello, everyone. Sorry, can you give me a little bit of background? There was a little bit of background noise here, so I
Oh.
missed part of that.
So I was just mentioning, and I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you were part of the group of students who worked on that TEGL assessment with me. And the hardest part of the essay was exploring how it did or did not develop your ethical and moral responsibility in a long term, right? For the long range. And that was the hardest part of the essay for people to really reflect on. And I said that I felt that it was so difficult because students struggled with it, because they struggled with that hierarchy of that macro, meso, and micro, meso, and macro. They really didn't see the problem bigger than the organization that they were working with. And secondly, because it required external research. So I didn't know if it was those two pieces alone, and if you, from a student perspective, could offer some perspective as to why you felt it was the most challenging part of the essay.
Sure. So with the TEGL essay, I thought it's been a while, but in and of itself, it was so kind of daunting to look at, specifically because I had been involved in service before that, but was never asked to reflect and connect to that extent. And part of it too was, I think it was only like my second or third semester. So it was something that I kind of went into, and I was looking at it and was like, okay, like, how am I going to kind of make these connections, especially since it is sort of that only introductory foundations of an education course. And I hadn't been exposed to the education sort of aspect before that. My service learning I did before that was for a completely different course, completely different academic department. So having the questions that the TEGL asked in that introductory course and kind of towards that beginning of the educational career, it did make it really difficult. And the fact that previously with service learning, we were just asked to reflect, no research involved, anything like that, and more so related to classwork and parts of the course, but not so much the higher theories, specifically because the service I did before that was for a math course. It was an introductory math course, so it's not like I was applying the theory to, or applying my service to the theories. It was kind of pushing us to make those connections, which is difficult, especially if it's your first time in a course like that, trying to make those connections and having those experiences. So that was probably why it was always just so daunting for me. And I'm sure you remember I was asking you a lot of questions about it just because it was a big undertaking, at least for me at the time. But yeah, that's my memory of it. But I believe I was still able to get it done and kind of force myself to make those connections and get those thoughts.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I don't know, Lori, if this was illuminating for you as well, but a light bulb just went on for me too. I never thought of the kind of prerequisite skills and knowledge that students did or did not have that they brought to this essay and that experience. Yes, it was a very challenging essay. It was a national grant, right? There were 6 of us, I think 6 different community colleges nationwide who worked on it. And we wrote, a prompt that we thought made sense to us and was applicable to the population that we were working with. And we didn't really think about where that population came from prior to the course that we were doing it in. So thank you so much. This is not something I have ever heard before, but yes, for all those in attendance, she killed it. She knocked it out of the park. And that's why she is where she is today.
You're absolutely right. It was very enlightening what Nicole just said. And the other thing too, is I've been working with Nicole for almost 2 years now. I didn't know she was part of the TEGL grant when you were doing it, but that was really an excellent description of what your involvement was, Nicole. Thank you so much.
That is so cool. I'm fascinated to hear more about this. Kathy, is there any report coming out of that grant or anything that you could share that we can bring out?
Lori could certainly direct you to it. There was a big report.
Yep. Yep.
Excellent. I suspected there always is in those big national grants. I say this as a grant maker who makes everybody write reports. It's just kind of how it goes. We love reports. We have covered, I think, all of the questions that have come up. But, oh, nope, I'm sorry, one more. So do students and faculty feel like their service learning experiences help to connect them with broader communities in ways that may make them encouraged to continue to be involved with their broader communities? Do you find that your students end up being interested in advocating for shaping policy? So you've talked about those different levels. Each, you know, Kathy, you talked about, all of you, Lauren, you talked about it, Jen, you talked about it as well. Do you find that students are finding their way through them, continued beyond their service learning programs?
I've certainly had the experience where a number of my service learners have decided to stay with their service learning placement as a volunteer because they felt so strongly that they had started something that they didn't really want to end. And especially in terms of making a difference in their community, I think that I've had a number of students who that they made that connection. Right? I'm not here, I'm not a secretary, I'm not a babysitter, I'm actually serving or helping to serve a community. And that has happened a number of times where my students were like, wow, I can't wait to go back there. You know, it becomes less of an assignment and more of a kind of educational life learning adventure. And that is so rewarding for both myself and the students.
I would also add, yeah, everything that Laura's describing, absolutely. And then I would also add that you notice that students, from doing the service learning experience, develop this confidence in knowing that not only, yes, that they can do different things that they want to get involved in, but having more of those skills that they've developed from the experience about how do you connect with organizations, how do you do that communication, how do you know the way in which things operate. And so having that confidence to be able to do it, and also having more of those skills because they've done it once before to be able to continue. And so I would say absolutely, they not only are they interested in continuing with things, and many of them do, but also feeling like, yes, I know I will be doing more of it. And they will often also have a certain path that they know that they like to go through as well, because they've had some experiences about, you know, okay, this kind of led me to now this interest, and I know more about how I want to get involved in this area. And so that's been a really neat thing to see.
That's awesome. Everything that you're all talking about also is just deeply connected to the theme that we're talking about today, right? Civic engagement, and being connected to your community and the responsibility we have as a community members. I wanted to call in Phoebe Chen. You had a hand up.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Phoebe. I'm a student at Raritan Valley Community College. I just wanted to share my personal experience with the service learning projects or program. So I'm an English major, and my service learning project had nothing to do with my major. I was required to do a service learning project through my environmental science and sustainability course, and I chose to create environmentally friendly spotted lanternfly traps, which are basically just an invasive species on the east coast of the United States, and they've caused a lot of economic and environmental damage on our community. So yeah, basically I had the ability to get together with fellow students from the RVCC Environmental Club and my high school Green Club, and we were able to collaborate on that. So not only are we still continuing with it after my project was completed, because this is still like a very big issue in our community, but we're still able to collaborate and spread the word in our communities and educate people in my town and the people in my school about this issue, so we can put an end to it a lot sooner. So I just wanted to share that with everyone.
Thank you so much, Phoebe. And I do want to mention that we offer a student enrichment grant, and Phoebe wrote a proposal to the foundation, the RVCC Foundation, and it was awarded, I think it's up to $1,000, Phoebe, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
to carry on her project with the other students. And just so you know, Gigi, there's a link in the documents that we all put together for this. Phoebe presented along with a number of other students who were on this call at the statewide student conference. And she did a presentation on this work. And so there's a link to it if you want to share that with, other people. And there are a couple of other students here. I know Gerardo presented at the student conference, and Gerardo's got a completely different focus, which is voter registration and getting students engaged in that way, if he wants to say something. And I think Rebecca might still be here, I hope. But Rebecca, no, she's off. Okay. But I don't know if Gerardo wants to jump in and comment. Do we have time?
Yeah, no,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I actually had my hand down, so like that works out. So like perfect. So basically, yes, hello, my name is Gerardo. I know I've been kind of in and out of the meeting because I've been kind of running errands, but I've been listening in, and I just want to say thank you to everyone here because I do feel that there was a lot of very useful information. And I do really think that, it's great to meet with people that are actively engaged in service learning, as I feel that coming together, we can really brainstorm and work on greater projects. So essentially what I created, or what I had worked on, was an adaptation of a plan called Our Votes Matter. Our Votes Matter was for RVCC, essentially a game plan where they had set out what we would do for 2020 period, essentially covering the census and the election, which were the two big political events going on in that year. Of course, as we know, 2020 also brought upon the pandemic. So that meant that a lot of the plan was basically unusable. We really couldn't use it because a majority, if not all of the events, were basically based on being in person, something that was not going to happen. So the question for the service learning project was, how can we grab this project that is established, and how do we turn it into something that works in the online environment? And Our Votes Matter was essentially that. It was taking ideas based on, promoting useful resources, such as the links to register to vote, links to places where to drop off your mail-in ballots, where to sign up for the census, how to sign up for the census. So all those useful resources that we want people to have to be able to, be civically engaged as citizens. Our Votes Matter was based on providing those. And then civic engagement does not only, require you to be engaged in the mode of, be having those resources, but you also have to be a thinking citizen. We are required to at least every couple of years vote, even at the minimum if it's for president. So we want to have citizens that are not only have those resources available, but also know how to use them. So the project took both an angle of not only being about awareness, but also being about information. So at the same time that we were making people aware of the resources, we wanted to let them know what were the big political issues, what are the opinions on those political issues, how you can approach those, and how you can be engaged in other civic engagement, such as Martin Luther King Day, and other ways that you can connect and help out, such as in Black History Month as well. So that's essentially what Our Votes Matter became. It became from one plan to an online project to, even though there was a pandemic going on, for us to be able to politically and civically be engaged and getting students engaged at all times throughout the campus, online or not. So yeah, thank you.
That was excellent, Gerardo. Thank you so much.
Wow.
So, Gigi, I think one of the things, the common thread that's coming through is that the pandemic has not stopped our college, our faculty, our students, and our community at all. Right? We just moved forward thanks to them.
Yeah, that's absolutely a huge theme. And we're seeing it all around the state, honestly. We have a statewide mandate. It's so impressive to hear all of this. I'm sitting here with a pen, jotting things down in my notebook because I have 1,000 things to follow up with people about. But unfortunately, we're running out of time today. I'm sorry to say, but there is a little bit more in the sense that this is not the last time we're gathering. So first of all, I'd like to thank Lori and our wonderful panelists for everything you brought today. I would also like to really thank everybody who asked a question or nodded along or gave, especially these wonderful students who talked about their experiences and the difficulties they had and the successes that they found, the way this has impacted them. Additionally, I'm not sure how many of you have been following along in the chat. A bunch of community partners have mentioned their exceptional experiences with service learning, which is just so great to hear. And I mentioned that this is not the last program. There's a few more opportunities, in fact, for us to get together. We are going to have a follow-up to this program specifically called In the Weeds. And In the Weeds is designed to take all of these ideas that we've talked about today and brainstorm ways to think about them in action. Now, this has been a very action-oriented session already, but I can tell there's so much more for people to talk about and think about and questions to ask. So if you're able to, I really encourage you to join us. The In the Weeds for this program is going to take place on Tuesday, March 23rd. That is exactly 1 week from today, and it's at noon. And I sort of say like same bat time, same bat place here on Zoom. But we're going to be sending out an email to everybody who registered for this program to give you the Zoom link for that program as well. I know, Lori, you'll be with us. Anybody else is welcome to come and join. It's going to be a very freewheeling conversation lasting no more than an hour. So please come back if you have the opportunity to do that. As I said, you'll get an email with the link to the Zoom. The next program in this series, this Democracy Conversations Project series, is called Youth, Power, and Policy. Very related, I think. We started talking a little bit about those policy questions. And that will be hosted by the New Jersey Council for the Humanities and Atlantic Cape Community College. It will be taking place on Wednesday, March 24th in the evening. It starts at 5:30 p.m. So I encourage you to join us if you can. That program will be shortly followed by another. We have 2 in 1 week. And again, is a youth-focused program, Youth Voting from Suppression to Expression with Brookdale Community College will take place on Friday, March 26th. That's next Friday, not this coming, but the following, at 10:00 a.m. And there is a total of 8 public programs and then various other things that are happening in the Democracy Conversations Project program. You can register for these programs and all of the others that New Jersey Council for the Humanities hosts from our website at njhumanities.org. You can also learn everything else that we do at the New Jersey Council for the Humanities. So that really brings us to the end of our primary portion of our program. I'm actually going to stop recording now because the very last little bit